The woman in black who stood up at her husband's funeral and pointed directly at George Soros had lost everything, and she wanted the world to know who she blamed. What happened in the next 5 minutes didn't just silence a cemetery full of mourners. It revealed the human cost of financial warfare and proved that sometimes the most powerful response to accusations isn't defense, it's taking responsibility for consequences you never intended but can't deny you caused. Bangkok, Thailand, October 23, 1997. Wat Benchama Bofit, the Marble Temple, one of Bangkok's most sacred spaces, where Thai royalty have been cremated for over a century, where elaborate spires reach toward monsoon clouds, where golden Buddhas watch over ceremonies that mark the end of earthly suffering. Today, it hosts the funeral of Dr. Somchai Ratanakasin, former Deputy Finance Minister of Thailand, economic advisor to 3 prime ministers, architect of Thailand's development strategy, and one of 8 officials who committed suicide during the Asian financial crisis. The temple grounds overflow with mourners, government ministers in formal Thai dress, banking executives in black Western suits, academic colleagues wearing traditional white scarves of respect, journalists maintaining respectful distance while documenting the ceremony, foreign diplomats representing nations that depended on Thailand's economic stability, and scattered throughout, ordinary Thai citizens whose savings accounts, retirement funds, and children's educations vanished when their currency collapsed 40% in 4 months. But there's one mourner who doesn't belong, who draws whispered comments and sideways glances, who represents everything these people blame for their suffering. George Soros, 67 years old, wearing a simple black suit, standing alone near the temple's outer wall. Maintaining the respectful distance of someone who knows his presence is controversial, but feels morally obligated to pay his respects anyway. Soros came to Bangkok not to gloat, not to survey the damage his trades helped cause, but to attend the funeral of a man he'd never met, but indirectly destroyed. Dr. Somchai Ratanakasin shot himself in his government office 3 weeks earlier, leaving behind a suicide note that blamed international speculators for making his life's work building Thailand's modern economy meaningless overnight. The note specifically mentioned foreign predators who attack developing nations for profit, and financial colonialism that destroys what we spent decades building. Soros knows he was the predator Somchai meant. But there was something George Soros didn't expect about facing the human consequences of his mathematical precision. 6 months earlier, Soros had identified what he called fundamental economic imbalances in Thailand's financial system. The Thai baht was pegged artificially high to the US dollar, requiring massive foreign borrowing to maintain. Thai banks had lent billions for real estate speculation. The country's current account deficit had reached unsustainable levels. The mathematics were clear. The peg would collapse. The currency would devalue. The economic boom would become economic catastrophe. So Soros did what he always did when he identified unsustainable economic arrangements. He bet against them, heavily. His quantum fund, along with other international hedge funds, borrowed Thai baht and immediately converted them to dollars, creating massive selling pressure that forced the Thai central bank to spend billions defending the currency peg. When the bank ran out of foreign reserves, the peg collapsed. The baht lost 40% of its value in 4 months. Thailand's economy imploded. Millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, their futures. From Soros's perspective, he was simply identifying and exploiting mathematical reality. The Thai economic system was unsustainable. It would have collapsed eventually, regardless of his participation. His trades merely accelerated the inevitable while providing liquidity during the transition. Classic economic theory, rational market behavior, efficient price discovery. But Dr. Somchai Ratanakasin hadn't seen it as rational market behavior. He'd seen it as economic warfare against a developing nation, as financial colonialism that destroyed decades of careful development, as personal attack on his life's work building Thailand from agricultural poverty into industrial prosperity. The shame of watching his economic policies crumble, of being blamed for Thailand's suffering, of feeling responsible for millions of his countrymen losing everything, had driven him to take his own life. Which is why Soros is here, standing in a Buddhist temple, surrounded by people who consider him a financial terrorist, paying respects to a man whose death he caused indirectly, but undeniably. The ceremony proceeds according to ancient Thai tradition. Monks in saffron robes chant prayers for Dr. Somchai's journey to the next life. Incense smoke rises toward carved wooden ceilings. Family members offer flowers, food, and personal items to ease their loved one's transition from earthly existence. The ritual is beautiful, peaceful, designed to provide comfort to the grieving and dignity to the deceased. Then Margaret Chen stands up. Margaret Chen, Dr. Somchai's widow, 43 years old, former university professor, mother of 2 teenage children, now facing life without the man who'd been her partner for 22 years. She's wearing traditional Thai funeral dress, simple black clothing with white accessories, but she carries herself with the particular dignity of someone who's endured unbearable loss and emerged determined to speak truth, regardless of consequences. You won't believe what she did next. Margaret Chen turns away from her husband's casket, looks directly across the temple grounds toward where George Soros stands. Her voice, trained by years of university lecturing, carries clearly through the sudden silence. "You came to my husband's funeral," she says in accented but perfect English. "The man whose life you destroyed, whose work you made meaningless, whose death you caused." The temple goes silent. Hundreds of mourners turn toward this confrontation between grief and power, between human cost and mathematical precision, between the woman who lost everything and the man who gained billions from her loss. Soros doesn't move, doesn't defend himself, doesn't walk away, just stands there, accepting Margaret Chen's words, acknowledging her right to speak them, recognizing that in this moment, at her husband's funeral, her pain matters more than his reputation. "My husband spent 30 years building Thailand's economy," Margaret continues. 30 years creating jobs for millions of people. 30 years helping poor farmers become middle-class families. 30 years building schools and hospitals and roads and everything that makes a country modern and prosperous. Her voice becomes stronger, more accusatory. "You destroyed all of that in 4 months. Not because Thailand threatened you, not because our economy attacked yours, but because you could make money from our collapse, because our suffering was profitable for you." The mourners watch in fascination and horror. This isn't supposed to happen at funerals. Funerals are for grief and remembrance, not confrontation and accusation. But Margaret Chen has moved beyond caring about social protocols. She's speaking truths that need to be spoken, regardless of setting or audience. "My husband believed that economics should help people live better lives," she continues. "That financial systems should serve human needs, that international cooperation should lift all nations, not destroy developing countries for rich countries' benefit. You believe that economics is warfare, that financial systems exist to concentrate wealth, that international cooperation means the strong destroying the weak whenever profit is possible. My husband's beliefs made him weak in your world. Your beliefs made you rich in his world. And now he's dead and you're here at his funeral, representing everything he fought against, everything that made his life's work meaningless." The words hang in the humid Bangkok air, like accusations that can't be answered, only acknowledged. Then Margaret Chen asks the question that changes everything. "So I want to know, was it worth it? Was destroying my husband's life worth the money you made? Was making me a widow worth the profits you earned? Was orphaning my children worth the returns you delivered to your investors?" Right at this point, everyone expected George Soros to defend himself. Instead, he walks toward Margaret Chen. Not aggressively, not defensively, just with the slow, deliberate movement of someone who recognizes a moment of moral reckoning and chooses to face it rather than flee it. The crowd parts as he moves through the temple grounds. Mourners step aside, creating a path between the grieving widow and the billionaire speculator. The monks continue chanting, but their voices seem distant now, background to this confrontation between human consequences and financial power. Soros stops 3 feet from Margaret Chen, close enough for conversation, far enough to respect her space and grief. His face shows something mourners don't expect to see, not arrogance or defensiveness, but something that looks like genuine remorse mixed with deep sadness. "Mrs. Chen," he says quietly, his Hungarian accent making the words formal but not cold, "I came here because I needed to see the human cost of decisions I make from behind a desk in New York. I needed to understand that my mathematical models represent real people with real lives and real families." Margaret stares at him. She expected defense, justification, economic theory. She didn't expect acknowledgement. "Your husband was right about what economics should accomplish," Soros continues. "Right that financial systems should serve human needs. Right that international cooperation should lift all nations. I've spent my career believing that markets automatically produce those outcomes, but markets don't care about human suffering. They only care about mathematical efficiency. Then why do you participate in them? Because I believed that efficiency and humanity were the same thing. That correcting mathematical imbalances automatically created better outcomes for everyone. That accelerating inevitable economic adjustments reduced total suffering rather than increased it. And now?" Soros looks at the casket containing Dr. Somchai's body. Now I realize that being mathematically right and morally right aren't always the same thing. That causing inevitable collapse faster doesn't necessarily cause less suffering. That my distance from consequences doesn't eliminate my responsibility for consequences. But what he said next shocked everyone at that funeral. Mrs. Chen, I cannot bring back your husband, cannot undo Thailand's economic collapse, cannot restore the millions of jobs and savings and futures that were lost, but I can do something else. What? I can use the money I made from Thailand's suffering to rebuild what was destroyed, not as charity, not as guilt payment, but as acknowledgement that when financial speculation causes human suffering, those who profited from the speculation have obligations to those who suffered from it. Margaret Chen stares at him. What are you proposing? A foundation, funded with my profits from currency speculation, dedicated to rebuilding economic opportunity in countries damaged by financial crises. Not run by me, not controlled by Western financial interests, but governed by people like your husband who understand that economics should serve human development. How much money? To start, $50 million. More, as the foundation proves, it can deploy capital effectively for human benefit rather than financial return. The temple grounds have gone completely silent. Mourners strain to hear this conversation between grief and power, between moral accusation and financial responsibility. Margaret Chen looks at this man who destroyed her country's currency and killed her husband, who flew halfway around the world to attend a stranger's funeral, who's offering to fund economic reconstruction with profits from economic destruction. Mr. Soros, your money won't bring back my husband. No, it won't. It won't undo Thailand's suffering. No, it won't. It won't change the fact that your trades ruined millions of lives. No, it won't. Then why should I accept it? And then George Soros said something that transformed Margaret Chen's understanding of justice, responsibility, and the possibility of redemption. Because your husband spent 30 years building Thailand's economy to help people live better lives, the foundation I'm proposing would continue that work. Would use financial speculation's profits to fund human development, would turn economic destruction into economic reconstruction. You want to use my husband's death to rehabilitate your reputation? No, Mrs. Chen. I want to use my guilt over your husband's death to continue his mission. I want to prove that financial power can serve human needs when guided by people who understand that mathematics without morality is destruction. Margaret Chen stands silent for a long moment, processing this offer, this acknowledgement, this attempt at redemption that can't undo damage, but might prevent future damage. If I agreed to this foundation, she says slowly, I would want guarantees, real oversight, actual commitment to development rather than Western financial interests. You would run it, you and people you trust. I would provide funding and stay out of operational decisions. You would trust me to spend your money wisely. Mrs. Chen, you understand better than I do what economic development should accomplish. You've seen the human cost of getting it wrong. You have more motivation than anyone to get it right. And you would do this because you feel guilty? I would do this because feeling guilty without taking action is self-indulgent. Because your husband was right about what economics should accomplish, and proving him right matters more than protecting my reputation. What happened next changed both their lives forever. Margaret Chen extends her hand to George Soros. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of a partnership born from tragedy and dedicated to preventing similar tragedies. Mr. Soros, I accept your proposal, not because I forgive what you did to Thailand, not because money compensates for my husband's death, but because Somchai would want his life's work to continue, and this foundation offers the best chance to continue it. They shake hands in front of Dr. Somchai's casket, surrounded by mourners who witness this transformation of guilt into action, of financial destruction into development funding, of personal tragedy into institutional commitment to human welfare. 6 months later, the Ratanakasin Foundation for Economic Development opens offices in Bangkok, Jakarta, Manila, and Kuala Lumpur. Margaret Chen serves as executive director. The foundation's mission: provide microfinance, education funding, and infrastructure development in communities affected by currency crises. Its funding source: profits from currency speculation redirected toward human development. The foundation's first project: rebuilding the Thai banking system with focus on small business loans rather than real estate speculation. Its second project: education scholarships for children whose families lost savings during the baht collapse. Its third project: technical training programs for workers displaced by economic restructuring. Margaret Chen becomes one of Southeast Asia's most respected development experts, not because she forgave George Soros, but because she used his guilt to fund solutions to problems his trades helped create. not because money compensated for her husband's death, but because continuing his work gave meaning to his sacrifice. George Soros continues currency speculation, but with different perspective. Every trade gets evaluated not just for mathematical probability but for human impact. Every profit gets partially directed toward development funding in affected regions. Every position considers not just whether economic collapse is inevitable, but whether accelerating that collapse serves human welfare or just financial efficiency. Years later, journalists ask Margaret Chen about that confrontation at her husband's funeral, about facing the man who destroyed Thailand's economy, about accepting money from the source of her suffering. "I didn't forgive George Soros," she tells them. Forgiveness implies that what he did was acceptable. What he did was mathematically logical and morally horrible. But I learned that holding on to anger against him didn't help my country recover. Using his guilt to fund recovery did help. I realized that the best revenge against financial speculation isn't emotional, it's economic. Building systems that serve human development rather than mathematical efficiency. Proving that economics can lift people up rather than just concentrate wealth. Making my husband's vision of development economics more powerful than Soros's vision of speculation economics. George Soros adds, "Margaret Chen taught me that being right about mathematics doesn't make you right about morality, that profitable trades can be immoral trades. That acknowledging responsibility for unintended consequences matters more than defending the logic behind the decisions that caused those consequences. She also taught me that guilt is only valuable if you transform it into action. That feeling bad about human suffering is self-indulgent unless you commit to reducing human suffering. That financial power becomes moral power only when it serves human welfare rather than just financial returns." The Ratanakasin Foundation has deployed over $200 million in development funding across Southeast Asia, has provided microfinance to 50,000 small businesses, has funded university educations for 12,000 students, has built infrastructure projects that serve 2 million people. None of that brings back Dr. Somchai Ratanakasin. None of that undoes Thailand's currency collapse. None of that eliminates the human cost of financial speculation. But all of it proves something important about responsibility, redemption, and the possibility of transforming destruction into reconstruction. So, here's the question for you. When your success causes someone else's suffering, even unintentionally, do you defend your logic or acknowledge their pain? When you profit from systems that hurt people, do you rationalize the mathematics or accept responsibility for the consequences? Because sometimes the most powerful response to moral accusations isn't defending yourself, it's using your guilt to fund solutions. Sometimes the best apology isn't words, it's committing your resources to fixing what you broke. And sometimes taking responsibility for unintended consequences matters more than proving your original decisions were logical. Margaret Chen didn't forgive George Soros at her husband's funeral, but she used his acknowledgement of guilt to continue her husband's mission. And that transformation of anger into action, of accusation into partnership, of financial destruction into development funding, became more powerful than either revenge or forgiveness. The woman who lost everything taught the man who had everything that money becomes meaningful only when it serves something more important than making more money.